So we're talking about the future of talent acquisition.
I think we're going to see some really interesting possibilities downstream for sure. I think Kevin got started this morning as part of your keynote, and there's just a lot of critical issues. But I'd rather just listen to some of you speak about where you're going. Kevin, it would be best if you kind of summarize, the key issues that you tried to bring up this morning, and we could kind of move off on that, because I'd love to hear from everyone in terms of where they're going and where they'd like to see it go. I will tell you, the one context for me is that when you look into the crystal ball, nobody really knows what it's going to say. We're all dealing with stimuli that we're getting now, and kind of anticipating where that's going to go. But I always believe it's worthwhile predicting the kind of future that you would like to be part of. So I don't think any of us are kind of gloom and doom folks, because the fact is we want to see a world that we're proud of being part of. And so we want to look for those possibilities that give us the most satisfaction for doing the work that we do. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, but we certainly, if we can see it, we might work more with more effort to make that happen and create it. But Kevin, what were some of the key issues that you raised earlier today?
Well, I just said I think that we're in a very disruptive period, obviously, for talent acquisition. I think it's remote work, AI, just those two things along with lots of other factors, have sort of changed the environment almost completely. And we've got incredible capability with technology now. I think very few TA functions are using that capability effectively. For a variety of reasons, mainly because they don't really have the expertise to do that. They're people. They're not technologists, and I think that's a real challenge. And I think that remote work and the fact that people can work and live anywhere is really changing the mental mindset of how we think about work and about people. And generally, every client I work with today, in their mind, they're still thinking eventually these people are going to come physically and work here. And I think that's a big mistake. I don't think they are going to physically come there and work there. So I think we're going to have to change our whole thought process around that. And there's lots of other stuff, but I had my say this morning. I'd love to hear from Sarah and Lou what they think. So.
And Judy.
Yes, Sarah. What's happening?
Yeah. Hey guys. Nice to see everybody. It feels weird not seeing you in person for over a year at this point. I think to agree with what you guys are saying, I think that remote work, I think AI, I think bringing the technology in, I think we were really fortunate in our industry that we started working on the ability to have people work from home as recruiters and as sourcers, and building technology that could support that a little bit earlier than other functions did. And so this, I think, was less impactful for the direct TA teams than it was for some of the other areas of business. And so I think that there is a huge benefit, I think, for us that we need to be just thankful for as an industry. And the AI piece of it, Kevin, I agree. I think we are, for the most part, companies are so far behind what they could and should be doing with technology. And part of that is out of a lack of education, a lack of understanding, and just assuming that if they make a little change, they're going to have to make really large changes. And I think what we have learned over the last 6 to 9 months is that it's okay just to make a little change, a little at a time, and just do what we can to get to the next step. We don't have to totally blow everything up and start over, but we do need to start progressing towards where we need to be.
Cool.
Right. Judy, what are your thoughts? If you look at the future of talent acquisition, what changes might you?
Well, I agree with everybody about, in terms of technology being a bigger part of future recruitment and how it's underutilized today. And I think that I think that recruiting is going to become more skills based, and I think that incorporating technology into that process is going to be key. And I think that recruiters are going to become technologists. You know, like I think that you can be a people person and a technologist as well. So I don't know if it's just like my personal push towards incorporating more of technology, but I've been really creative. Like if I can't get something from my company at a time, like I'll be creative and I'll find like a technological solution that will solve the problem without like a big package that, you know, I'm going to have to wait on or something like that. And I think that another thing that's going to change in recruitment is just compassion with all the diversity and inclusion work that's being done right now. I think that's going to evolve into like openness and belonging and things like that. And I think that it's going to become interwoven into how we practice recruitment. And I think that technology is going to play a big part in that, because I believe one of the most important things in terms of diversity and inclusion is structured interview process. And I'm kind of visualizing like how software can be set up to manage that a little bit easier. But I think that there's going to be a strong need for software that makes it easier to structure an interview process in a way that makes diversity and inclusion more fair and consistent.
So do you think that fairness, and this is a question for everybody, do you think that fairness is going to be perceived for recruiting in the future by the candidates that we're dealing with? Because right now, if we asked, 10,000 candidates about the fairness of hiring, most of them would have a number of issues around that. Mm-hmm. And they may be right or they may be wrong, but that perception has existed for a long time. And I'm not as optimistic that we're going to solve it in the near term, but I would certainly love it if we came together and were able to make that shift.
I think we're going to make a shift. There's a number of technologies that can already do this. I don't think it's something that we hope to do. It's something that we already can do. We just have to get companies to shift and do it and stop spending their D&I budgets on marketing about how great they are at being inclusive, and actually move their money into things that are actually going to change what they're doing. And so the technology is already there. I know of at least 5 or 6 new products that are getting released in the next 12 months that we have been fortunate enough to have some part in doing some, work behind the scenes with. So we know that it's there and it is coming. And I think when you have sites like, Indeed and Glassdoor and some of the other more niche sites that are coming up that are going to start allowing people, like employees and candidates, to talk about their feedback from a DEI perspective and what it's really like to be there as a woman or a person of color or religious minority or any of these other things. I think it's also going to change, just like Glassdoor, whether we like to admit it or not, absolutely had an impact on how companies did stuff. The perception may not change, but I think the practices might, faster than the perception does.
Okay.
I think that the perception is going to evolve, because for a couple of different reasons. Like right now, the focus is on like the post George Floyd world, which is really significant, and there's a lot of changes happening there. But I also think that as we improve in that area, something else that we might not see happen right now is going to pop up. And for example, I did a little consulting gig with a company who wanted to improve the LGBT management, like the diversity within LGBTQ within their management, because they were very diverse on the entry level positions. But once they said not one person from LGBTQ moved into management, and there's a ton of them all over the place. So we had to take a look at that, and it's something that's still in the works. But I just feel like we can't see everything that's going to evolve in society. So I think that there's bound to be something that, there's bound to be a voice that we're not going to predict.
I think
let me say something since I haven't spoken at all. But I remember 10 years ago, I was with Kevin Wheeler at an ERE conference. It was John Sullivan and I were at the last session. You might remember that, Kevin. And they asked, what's going to happen? This is 2010. What's going to happen in the future of recruiting? And I just listened for 15 minutes and whatever your buddy said, and you didn't say anything different than I heard 10 years ago.
Great.
And 10 years ago, I said, nothing's going to change.
Wow.
We go in circles. We all say next week's going to have something better. Next year, we're going to have something better. And I'm going to say, we're not going to have anything better. It's going to be exactly the same. We have not improved quality of hire in 20 years.
No.
And we're not we talk about new problems and new challenges. And sorry guys, I think we're going around in circles. And new technology is not going to do it. But I mean, I'm sorry. That's what I say. I'm the super cynic here, and that's why I told Stacey I shouldn't be here.
Lou, you have talked about change, though, Lou. You've talked about how mobile you can apply on your phone, and new technology has made applying way easier. And
say this: best candidates aren't going to apply on their phone, so it's a waste of time. We already interview candidates for diversity. We don't understand how to do it. You don't need to wait a year to have some technology to do it. The one thing I have absolutely seen, because on a bunch of search assignments this past year, it is now easy to find candidates in 24 hours. Great candidates who are passing and interview them properly and accurately. But it's not about technology. It's about understanding the work and understanding what candidates need and implementing those things.
Well, surely that's definitely part of it. But technology, I mean, nobody mails a CV in anymore. They use technology, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we've already used a lot of technology. You may not call it technology, but it is. And, we've had the internet, we've had career sites, we've had mobile tools. So people are using technology. It's not the same as it was.
Okay, I agree with you. That's, I mean, to me, the best piece of technology is you can talk to people on the phone.
You also said people aren't staying at companies as long as they used to, and there's a correlation with the technology and your ability to apply and all the
I say that's not a benefit. That's where technology it's made turnover easy. We don't look at getting a career, so we made things faster. Now we need technology to override the fact that 1 in 100 people or 99 out of 100 people shouldn't have applied to begin with. So we've added overhead technology as opposed to improving quality of hire. And I think that's where you're missing I hear everybody talk all the time. I work with we hire great diverse candidates. In 3 to 5 days, we get candidates.
Well, you raised an interesting issue,
Lou. Gerry?
I said you raised a real interesting issue for me, and that is I think we've improved significantly the way in which, whether we like it or not, employers look at the decisions that they're going to make. We may not have gotten to where we need to go, but certainly enormous amounts of money and effort have gone into technology to help employers make better decisions related to selection, etc. But I don't think the same effort has been made to help candidates make decisions.
And I'll go
fundamentally, their ability to access that data is just
I'm going to challenge your original, because where we made companies with technology to make better decisions? I totally disagree with that first premise.
So I'm going to
name one better decision that companies made to improve quality of hire. Let's think big, not little stuff here. Think big stuff here. Let's make this important. Quality of hire has not improved in 25 years.
I'm agreeing with Lou, because I remember us sitting in Orlando at Kennedy back in 2004, 2005,
you
2006, somewhere in there.
Were you that teenager there?
Yeah, I was.
How can you remember that far back, Sarah?
That was my first keynote, you guys.
I know,
but I remember sitting back, and we were sitting around it was also the first time I ever had a glass of wine. I also remember that when we went to dinner that night. I had never had wine before.
Bad influences.
So, but I remember us sitting around and having the same conversation. And I agree, Lou, like we are doing things to simplify it for the recruiter and to improve how we manage the process. We aren't necessarily moving it forward or changing the conversation on the bigger picture of how it's impacting business. And we do keep having these same conversations around quality of hire, around fixing how the candidate process works, around You know, how do we get improved retention? You know, we do keep repeating these exact same conversations. And, you know, there's slide decks that I did from 2009 that I could pull up and present today, and I tweak a couple of the buzzwords to whatever it is, and it's exactly the same stuff. We're talking about the same stuff. And I think a lot of it is because there's been such a focus on the technology, and there's been such a focus on some of the automation and some of these pieces that people don't want to admit that the big problem in a lot of companies is a really broken system and people that aren't necessarily trained to do the job better or to think on a larger scale about the business impact. They're so focused on the little, like, gotta fill this job. How many candidates did I get in? How many of this did I do? They're not really thinking, because they're not incentivized to care about the impact it actually has on retention, on engagement, on experience, on the way it fills out teams. I mean, how many recruiters don't even look at their current employees to identify internal mobility for talent? I mean, that's your best. How many times I sit and have conversations with recruiters and it's not even something they've thought of because it's such a focus on getting this quick, source, fast, instead of like the talent you already have sitting there. Mm-hmm. So it is, I sit in between both of you guys on this.
I'm seeing some.
Yeah, I don't think we've solved any. I don't know if we disagree. I think we've not solved all of these problems by a long shot. But I think the movement, the attempt, is all on the employer side rather than improving the quality of the decision of the candidate side as well, with giving them the kind of data and information that helps them make better decisions.
Okay, so let me
that could be coaching at an earlier point, etc.
So let me show you, Gerry, let me give you a close that I use when I close a candidate. And I was probably the first contingency recruiter in 1980 to give a 1-year guarantee. So I've been around a long time before most, other than Gerry and Kevin, I was around before you guys were.
You only got a year on us, so.
However, the close I ask, let's assume Judy's my candidate. I'm going to say, Judy, 3 days, I'm going to make her an offer. I say, Judy, forget the money. If this is not a career move, we shouldn't move forward. Why do you want this job? And I've already instructed Judy to ask the right questions. I told my clients, I said, Judy, the only way this is going to be a good job for you is if you get a 30% non-monetary increase. That consists of job stretch, job growth, job impact, and job satisfaction. This is Judy and I have been talking about this for 3 weeks before she got the offer. And I said, Judy, forget the money. Remember when we first met, I said, this is what you have to use to make a decision. Why do you want this job? And if Judy can't tell me the 30% in her own words, because she heard it from the hiring manager, she heard it from her boss, because I know Judy doesn't make the decision alone. She's going to make with everybody else. But if Judy truly has asked the right questions and made the right decision, she will be able to articulate that 30%. It will be, the money will be not unimportant, but less important.
Yeah.
And we can do that. We can do, you don't need you need some technology to send somebody an email or a text to do it, but that's how you get candidates to make the right decision. When you think about win-win hiring or hiring for the anniversary date rather than a start date, the world changes. And I think companies should give a 1-year guarantee to their candidates and candidates.
The moment you're telling me about efforts, techniques to get people to make the right decision, tells me that they're not making the decision.
Well, that's absolutely true.
That there's an effort to manipulate the decision. So fundamentally, I'm looking for more of the data, not necessarily technology, but the transparency that corporations need to provide. For example, I'd like to see the data around pay disparity of every single corporation. And you know what? Only a quarter of the United States Fortune 500 have even done the calculation. And those that have done the calculation, if you ask them who gets to see the data, there's very few people who actually do it. So,
and from a technical perspective, it's easy to do now.
I think that's a distraction. I think you're missing the big picture for some minor little thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Not necessarily that minor.
Well, I tell you, so let me go to Judy again. Let me go back to Judy. I placed more female accountants in the world than anybody. Now, here's the thing is, I've negotiated compensation with males and females. It's easier to negotiate a compensation with a woman because the money isn't an ego issue. The job is the issue. So when you start understanding the root cause of these issues, it's not because the company wanted to pay Judy less. It's because that she realized that she engaged the job, she saw the job.
So they're willing to take advantage of her.
Excuse me, Sarah?
So they're willing to take advantage of it.
No, it's not
right?
advantage.
Like,
it
is because
I don't think so.
100%
do that.
It's nothing to do with advantage. It's I, as the recruiter, would say, I'm going to deal with Judy rather than Kevin and Jerry because I know they're easier to deal with. So I'm not.
Yeah,
Kevin, I think
easier to deal with means easier to
digging
manipulate and
himself
sell on the emotional aspect.
No, I
of
think
it.
the guy has a bigger ego and is negotiating it. So I think you guys, you're looking at it from that lens that you're saying. I don't think it's the correct lens. And I think we come up with conclusions, look at data, and we see that don't makes a lot of good sense. And I'm saying that's not the case.
You can't leave,
I get it.
Kevin.
This is my mom's face, Lou.
I don't agree,
My
but
mom's
I
face.
hear you.
Okay.
I'll just say there are some technologies that I wish that more talent acquisition professionals would take a look at stuff that is more designed for broader talent management or for the business in general so that they can better understand this. And so you can look at, there are tools that could come in and look at the analysis. In fact, I know more of the Fortune 100 have done these things. They're just not kind of connecting the dots always because it's held by a small group. But there are technologies right now that could come in and do a full pay disparity of your entire analysis instead of having to be a big compensation consultant and months-long process like it used to be. It's literally like 35 minutes and boom, you have all of your research and all of your reports.
What is that going to help you guys in improving quality of hire?
It helps because
That's a
you are
distraction.
getting, here's why, I'm not going to go work for somebody that wants to underpay me because they think I'm easier to deal with because I'm not going to negotiate.
Maybe you're a
with
better
them.
manager.
So what they're
maybe
going to get is somebody
it's an
else.
ego issue. I think it's, to me, hey,
It's
if
not
you're
an ego issue, it's an equality issue.
manager, it's not about the money.
No.
Yes,
It's an equality. It's an equality issue. It is not,
It's not an
absolutely
equality
not.
issue. It's
Why should I make less? Somebody else is willing to be an ass and negotiate harder.
yeah, but
Why
that person
shouldn't the
will
company?
be promoted, and the woman Judy will be making twice as much as the asshole 2 years from now because
No,
she's a good
have
manager.
you
and
never
a
worked in
leader.
corporate America? Who gets promoted? It's not the women. Like, trust me. Like, that's why so many women are flocking out of.
You're not going to win this argument. Let's move on.
just saying, so many women
because
are
I don't
leaving.
agree with it.
As of this morning, just came out this morning, so many women are leaving corporate America and starting their own businesses and moving into this other side in part because they're being overlooked for promotions when they are more qualified.
Well,
they're getting
a critical issue. I think that's
that is a critical issue.
That's not a
So
money
when
issue.
we're
That's a critical issue.
So when we're talking about fair compensation and pay compensation, we're looking at it fairly, that is a key thing. And it is something that people, both women and people of color, are looking at from very on in the recruiting process. It is impacting employee experience. It is impacting employee engagement. It is impacting everything else that I just spent the last year researching on how we could retain and become more profitable as a business. And so when that is impacting how much you are making as a business owner, as a CEO, as a shareholder, by all means, then it is impacting how it relates to business and to recruiting.
4 times as many women have left the workforce in the last 6 months has been. So that's from McKinsey. And so I think it's kind of interesting to see there's a whole set of issues. The question is what's going to change in the next couple of years? Are we going to have more recruiters or fewer recruiters?
Fewer.
Curious on that pay disparity. Is that something that's shown? Are there any companies that are actually revealing that data, or is that just internal?
Sure, I will tell you that Illumina is one of the few companies that actually sends a package out to candidates coming in that identifies specifically the pay disparity for age, gender, and race before they come in as a candidate, and points out what they're doing about it.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of transparency is the kind of indicative of the kind of company I would like to work for.
That's
in my opinion.
I think that's interesting.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
On the other hand, when you ask the question, have you done the calculation? And many major companies said we've done the calculation. I say, well, okay, so do you supply that to the recruiters so they have more? They can be more accountable in helping to deal with the hiring managers who might, in fact, not be thinking appropriately relative to how they are handling the information that's coming down from rewards. And they go, well, we don't supply that information really down below this particular director level. So because we're trying to develop overall strategies to solve the problem. I'm going, you know what? It's not until we push data down from a transparency point of view, you're really not dealing with transparency. You're just talking about it. So I'm curious though, what's going to happen? What's going to change? Do you think there'll be more transparency?
That it's these kind of conversations that I hear you guys talk about, and I've heard them 10 to 15, 20 years, nothing's going to change about improving quality of hire. It's a distraction. It's not unimportant, but if the issue is what's the future of recruiting, that's not the future of recruiting.
So the future of recruiting is not improving quality of hire?
I'm not saying that's not important, Gerry. I'm just saying that it's a distraction and people are not focusing on the big issue. Quality of hire has not improved. Job satisfaction has not improved for any purpose for 20, 25 years. Look at the that's not going to make a change by focusing on transparency. That's the only point.
Much bigger issue here that we're not talking about, which is the fact that the way companies are organized and the way we hire people is totally changing right now. And I think remote work is changing this whole equation, So the whole comp system we have, the whole structure we have today is from last century, okay? It's really not going to survive, I don't think, in the next 10 years, all right? Now, it may not change in the next year or two, but it's definitely moving in a different direction, okay? Women are leaving the workforce right now, not only because of not being promoted, but because with remote work and childcare, they need more flexibility in their schedules, and they're not being given it because we still have a paradigm that you work 8 to 5 even though you're home, when they could actually do the work from midnight to 3 or whenever the kids were having a nap if they wanted to, right? So there's a bigger issue here than just whether we're fitting into the old system. We need a new system, and I think it's emerging out of a lot of these smaller startup companies that are changing how they're working. I don't expect that you're going to see big changes right away from Microsoft or IBM or any of the biggies. Okay, it's going to come from these companies you've never heard of, the small startup companies that are already doing things in a different way, and they may not get the headlines in Wall Street Journal and all this stuff, but they're slowly changing the picture. And I think we're going to work differently. We're going to pay people differently. There's going to be more focus on getting paid for skills and what you contribute as opposed to your degree and your gender and all this other stuff. So it's a big shift going on. It's driven largely by young people.
Well, I support that. To me, that's an obvious shift, sure.
Pardon me, Lou?
I said that I agree with that. There are things changing.
Yeah, definitely.
But what's going to be meaningful for you, Lou?
That's a good question. To me, I would like to see, let me just kind of take it from a strategy standpoint. When the demand for talent is greater than the supply, you cannot use a process that's designed to weed out the weak. You have to use a process to attract the best. And if you look at most technologies, and I see somebody here said it makes it a more efficient process. It makes it a more efficient process of weeding out the weak and finding the best. But just like I said, in this marketplace, it is relatively easy to find good people. I think people in the second quarter, nobody wanted to leave. I mean, they were nervous. Now they're saying, okay, the world's not going to end. But we're reaching out to very strong talent in different arenas, and they're saying, yes, I'm ready to move for a different situation. And maybe the situation is like what Kevin talked about. Maybe it is like what you talked about, Gerry, with respect to compensation and transparency. But people are more open-minded. But it's not because they can apply on their phone. That's just that's someone who couldn't apply to begin with. 1 in 100 people gets interviewed who applies. What's the point of that? We're spending 99% of the thing to get rid of those 99% of the people who shouldn't apply. But I think if you can make it more customized, more personal, understanding it, I think those are real issues, but it's driven by the strategy. If the demand for talent is greater than supply, you have to reach out, you be proactive, you have to customize, you have to give that person a tremendous experience. And then at the end, when the candidate takes the job, you say, Judy, tell me why you want this job. Is it for the money? Is it because they're transparent? No, it's because of the work you're doing and where you're going to grow and develop and be a better person. And I think it's that type of mass customization, which I think what Kevin talked about is some of the themes there that people recognize they have to do it, and small companies are able to do it.
Yeah. And I look at technology ultimately being invisible. Technology is kind of a layer that supports being human and being compassionate and doing these things. But you got to go through this painful structural process of introducing and putting the technology in place before it becomes transparent. Nobody knows how their damn car works, and you don't care. All you care about is you get in the car, you turn the key or push a button, and it goes. Okay. But it took 100 years of technology to get to that point. All right. And so, we haven't got 100 years. We're going to do that in 5 years. But, the point is, once you get an infrastructure in place and nobody even knows it's there, you don't even think about it. Nobody knows how the internet works. Tell me how it works. Nobody knows. Okay. It doesn't matter. As long as it does what you want it to do, we're okay with it. Okay. So the same with the recruiting technology. It's not about technology. I agree. Totally agree. But we have to have that technology in place before we can do some of the other stuff that we want to do. I think it's
What do you think, Judy? Judy?
What?
Or Sarah, either one of you.
I was going to say, let's, and this is probably not the most popular location to be saying this, but why are we all assuming that we're going to have so many recruiters still, and that half of these recruiters' jobs are not going to be fully automated? Because they're going to be. Just like we are automating checkers, we are automating date tellers, we are automating everything else. If we are truly shifting to a skills-based economy where we could do more AI-driven assessments, we could do some of these things that are actually more focused on finding the right person, and we're removing this emotional gut that we think we have in order to hire the right fit, and we're actually looking at person for the right reasons. There's going to be a level of automation that removes recruiters out of this process. And so recruiters will become technologists, but they're going to become technologists in a very different way than what they assume they are going to right now. And so the skills are going to drastically change. It's not going to be a job of being a people person. It's going to be a job of being a curator and of understanding what you are looking for and identifying the skills and being a data scientist and being able to look and understand and do this. With that said, there is such a mistrust of AI and some of these tools by candidates that I think that is what is going to slow this down more than anything else. There's an assumption of even things like skills assessments via video interview where they could actually track to make sure somebody's doing it is somehow going to create bias and all of these other things. There's such a mistrust by the general consumer that it's going to slow it down. But at the end of the day, recruiters need to be reskilling and looking at some of these other options and better understanding. There's always going to be contingency in some of these high touch, but we built a system 4 years ago that is being used to hire huge numbers of people, where the entire hiring process does not include a human at all. It goes through, it assesses them, it checks them out, and it hires them on order of score and quality instead of doing it with any type of human interaction at all. And it's got a higher success rate than what was happening before when humans were involved. We've got to talk about the reality of what's going to happen to recruiting as a profession.
Yeah, absolutely. Great.
Go ahead, Judy.
I don't think that we're, I don't think that we're quite there to take humans out of recruitment, because technology isn't, we're just not, I don't think that we're ready for that. I don't see that happening.
There's more than 1 million hires a year happening already like that. And if we stop talking about everybody as being college educated, professional level type of hires, and we look at where the bulk of our hires are coming from in this country, it is from the hourly workforce, it is from skilled workers, it is from people who the conversations and the interview portion doesn't really matter nearly as much as passing some basic competencies and being able to fill a job, and are they going to show up on Monday? And we forget about that. We go to these conferences over and over and over, and we talk about everybody as if they have white-collar backgrounds, they're college educated, they're all of this, when that is not the bulk of the workers. And there's a lot of recruiters and there's a lot of HR people spending time on these type of things. When I say recruiting is going to change for a big segment of hiring, it absolutely is going to. There's, for a period of time, there's actually, obviously going to be people that are doing recruiting and more specialized in all of those roles. But look at how much sourcing has already been automated just in the last 5 years versus what was being done. I remember when we went through AIRS training. I'm sure some of you guys went through AIRS training back in the day, right? 1999, 2000, 2002.
I went through the first one.
Yep.
We're going through the AIRS training. One of you guys probably did my training. We went through the AIRS training, and it was all about everything was manual. It wasn't even at the point of Boolean, right? We're super manual, doing flips on websites, all of that. And so and before that, we used to play a game we jokingly call like, hey, mister, or excuse me. And so when you're working as an executive search, like you're calling up sourcing via the phone and being like, I think his name was John, Jim, and then the receptionist is like just giving you the name of every single person there, and you're typing and writing as fast as you can. Like that's how we used to source. That's not even close to what happens anymore, right? And so, you know, it has evolved and it has changed and it has automated and taken out a lot of people from having to be there already.
What about the negotiation piece, Sarah? What are your thoughts there when you're talking about it automating and not having that human component?
There is no automation. You're working at a gas station, you're going to make $13 an hour. That's the job. Take it or leave it. You're going to work at a front line as a flipping burgers. Here's the offer. Here's what it is, right? Like that's what it is. And a lot of companies are doing that for some pay equality as well, because everybody's just getting the same. Like that's what it is. It doesn't matter any of the other stuff. Here's what this job pays, period.
Okay. And that was what I was like getting at earlier. How many companies are actually showing that pay disparity and putting up their numbers? Because it comes, and I posed this question on a call last week. Can you actually show the salaries? And the room went nuts. And the recruiter's like, you cannot do that. You need the negotiators. And it's interesting to think that you could actually get rid of recruitment as a negotiation piece, because salary will be just, this is what your salary is, especially at tech companies at high level.
But you're talking about a totally different type of hire. You're talking about a different type of hire that has a negotiation. That is not the same that we are going to see in the next 5 years as an automated hire.
Lower, okay.
Yeah. So there is going to be a difference, but there's no difference, or there's no reason why you still can't put up your range of here's what we should be paying and here's what is fair compensation for this role.
Could be longer, and the reality is, if we wait long enough, we'll be required to put certain data in there. So in Europe, in many parts of Europe, every corporation has to do a calculation by a government's algorithm, and then publish that on their website. So that's already existing. Is that the best way of doing it? No. But on the other hand, it's better than nothing, and it gives people at least some sense of what that disparity might be. And so it may take another 5 or 10 years before we start seeing the capability to do some negotiation or to have some interaction between some of those algorithms. But I think it's going to be interesting, and it's going to come. And
I remember even a few years ago when I was still recruiting, if you were a mid-level professional, there was very little negotiation. I mean, you could negotiate a bonus, but that was about it. I mean, you were given a salary based on your experience, whatever, and that was pretty much it. You had to be, a director and above to really get into any significant kind of negotiation around salary. So I think, we've had that sort of structured salary system for quite a long time. And many.
We may have some issues relative to negotiation at lower levels when it comes to issues around whether or not I make enough money to put food on the table, to take care of my kids, to be able to send them to school, et cetera. And that is not going to be done by individuals. That's going to be done by a collective of individuals. And so if we want to really look at this issue longer term, that would imply that there could be an increase, if you will, in some kind of collectivization relative to negotiating with employers about fairness in the treatment of the kinds of people that feel that they're being abused because they have no other choice but to work for this company in a part-time rather than a full-time role where their benefits are cut and they no longer are able to take care of their kids. That kind of issue is going to balance the tendency for some corporations to go the wrong way.
Stacey, I also think just like we focus a lot on kind of white collar and college educated workers, I think there is also, I see a lot of discussion, especially in recruiting groups and at conferences, around tech related companies where there is a lot more freedom for negotiation and all of this. You try negotiating in a manufacturing company,
right? Or in a call center or in any of these jobs. Like that doesn't happen outside of most industries. Go into hospital systems, you know, like it just doesn't happen in the same way. And we kind of sometimes get in a little bubble of tech, and that's just not what happens. And or even advertising, I think, is marketing services outside of you know, a small handful of industries. It just doesn't work in the same capacity or in the same way at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Do you see globally, Kevin? What do you see? What do you see as some of the differences? Because I know you've got this extraordinary opportunity to go to a lot of different kind of countries and continents, et cetera. You know, are you seeing kind of a consolidation of approaches relative to recruiting, or do you see significant differences culturally that are probably not going to change?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you this, that when you go to China, the technology's off the chart. I mean, they're using AI-enabled apps to interview people on their iPhones. It's amazing. It's almost scary, okay? And what they can do, because they don't have any privacy laws, is even more scary in a way to us. But the point I'm trying to make is their use and adoption of technology is way ahead of where we are, and it's a central piece of what they're doing. Okay, in countries like Australia, it's a much more, their comp system is much more equitable around women and men. I think there's much less disparity in Australia between the genders, and the salaries are not negotiated generally. They're pretty, I mean, there's a little, you can have a discussion of, you know, a few $1,000s up and down, but it's fundamentally consistent depending on your position and so forth. So it's very different than here in terms of that. I think in the tech market, it's a really small percentage of people in the world that are employed in tech, really. I mean, compared to call centers and you know, the other kinds of jobs. So it's really a nit, you could say, in the whole space. But in those places, compensation is very often, a big chunk of it is equity, you know, or sweat equity. You know, you're not paid that well, but you're given a ton of stock that may or may not ever become real, right? So if you're lucky, it happen to get hired by Google, yeah. But, you know.
That raises an interesting question for me. If we really focus on a lot of companies that will allow more virtual work from anywhere, right? And the capability of doing that. And I'm sitting there in Silicon Valley and I'm going, really? Okay, I'm going to test this out. Thank you very much. I'm moving to Oklahoma. And you know what? You're paying me X thousands of dollars, et cetera, for what I think is a job that I'm doing and earning against that. You're making enough productivity for me while I'm in Silicon Valley. Why can't I keep the same amount in Oklahoma? And then you go, oh, I'm in Oklahoma, and you know what? I think I'm going to move to Budapest because I really want to spend the next 3 years in Budapest. And the issue is, are you going to change my salary? Obviously, I'm still doing the same job. So my point being, right, if there's a value for a job that's standard that says, you know, this job is worth this because I get X amount of productivity from it, then maybe because of where people live, I might give them a little bit more of a spiff because I need to see them more often or something to that effect. But the fact is, that could impact an awful lot of the strategies from businesses who move specifically to take advantage of people who are underpaid, if you will, for the work that they do. And of course, then the company makes a lot more money, and the guy at the top, typically a guy at the top, is making a shitload more bonus in relation to that, which is why he's making 700 times more than the average person. So I'm not suggesting that we change our view of capitalism, but I am saying that my sense of engagement in my company is in part impacted by the fact of who's benefiting by the value of my work. And so this whole issue about remote work may in fact create a little different distance or different kind of approach to how equity is thought about.
I think, working in a global company, which I pretty much did my whole life, where we had people everywhere around the world, pay is always localized. You get paid in Singapore what the average Singaporean person gets for that job. If I'm in Budapest, I get the average that a person in Budapest gets. So if I move from Silicon Valley, if I move from Omaha,
unless you're an old white male expat, then you're probably hiring an awful lot of people to help you out.
Yeah, but remember, the number of expats in the world today is like a tenth of what it was 20 years ago. All right.
Yeah, but it could be a lot more if you tell me I can work from anywhere and I decide to move to Singapore.
Oh, but no, right now, every global company I know, from Google to Microsoft, says if wherever you live, you get paid the local rate. I mean, that's just normal.
Well, I'm suggesting that might change if we really start thinking about what that means.
I don't know. I'm not so sure about that.
I think it would, because the difference is, it used to be that if you relocated somewhere, typically you were getting moved, or you were moving somewhere because you were going to be working in a particular office or going into a location. If there is no longer an office or a location to work out of, that I think is going to change the dynamics, and I think that that's going to be a discomfort level for a lot of people. I mean, we are starting and we're launching our company. I have zero plans at all to ever have office space. I have no need. I have employees now in 4 states that we will have by the end of the year. So we're kind of all over the place, and like, there's no need to ever have an office. I have clients that are giving up hundreds of thousands of square foot, and they are, millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars, and will not have office space anymore. Mm-hmm. And so that's where the question, the dynamic of localized pay really comes into play, because there is no local, right? They don't have a local, so then it really will become what it's worth to them as a business to pay somebody. And if somebody in New York needs to get paid more, I'll just hire somebody that isn't in New York, that, here's what I have to pay for the job. I don't care where they are. If they're in Oklahoma, enjoy, live it up with what you're getting paid.
You also, if you're employing somebody in another state, and this is kind of like comes with this whole remote workforce situation, you have to register your business in that state and pay taxes that are for that state, as well as the state your company is incorporated in. And so, like, I too have 4 sourcers who are working in all different states, and we had to incorporate our business in every single one of those states. And I was like, oh, okay. Work from home challenges, but I mean, good ones, but something to think about.
Yeah. I think offices are going. We just closed our office in Australia. There's nobody. We just subleased it out, and that's gone. And I think more and more that's what's going to happen. But the point is, I just don't think it's as big an issue as we're making it to be. We'll figure out what local rates are, and people will either accept it or not. I mean, if you want to live in a low-cost area, you're probably going to earn less money. I mean, the reason we pay people what we pay in Silicon Valley is because it costs $3 million to buy a house here, all right? Where it costs $300,000 to buy a house in Virginia. So, I mean, it's all relative to the market.
I think one of the things that has been really interesting to watch is I dabble in real estate. And so one of the things that has been really interesting to watch this year is how a lot of these cheaper markets have been drastically impacted by the flow of talent outside of California. Yeah. And so you have places like in Denver, which at one point you could buy a house for $200,000-$300,000, where those exact same houses, as of 2 weeks ago when I was there, were somewhere between $700,000 and $1 million for the exact same house, not updated from what it sold for at $200,000 6 or 7 years ago. Yeah. Boise is another great example. You used to be able to buy a house $125,000 to $150,000. You're now at $500,000 to $700,000 for the exact same house in some of the suburbs. And so I think that that's where some of these challenges are going to fall, because how do you pay somebody? You pay somebody based off of a outdated cost of living from 2016. Are we looking at current terms? Like, are we looking, look what happened to Austin? And so that's where some of these type of conversations are going to have to take place, because the local economy also is getting hurt and damaged and challenged. I'm from a ski town in North Idaho, right? Like, so our little town in North Idaho has quadrupled. A house that our family sold for $180,000, and they thought they were like, oh my gosh, we'll never get this again. Fast forward, sold for $1.9 million this month. right? And so it's like, that's the type of things. Local people and people that are not able to work remote and are not able to move around are not seeing those type of pay increases. And so the people that are migrating from West Coast, from Texas, from East Coast, and coming into these rural areas, they're completely changing the marketplaces, the dynamics, and it's definitely having a work from home or not work from home. We just built a house, my entire street, every single home has somebody that works from home. Every single house from before the pandemic all worked from home. Like, it's completely changing the dynamic of suburbs also, and creating other things. And so that is going to add another layer of hiring and equity and salary fairness and everything on this.
Now, there's no question, but
We have
that's
5
nothing
minutes,
new.
you guys.
I mean, that's been going on forever. I mean, look where Lou lives in Laguna Beach. You could buy a house in Laguna 40 years ago for $20,000. Today, you can't buy one for $3 million. Okay?
But
So
40 years versus 5 years. When something is going up 4 to 5 times in 5 years, that's a much bigger difference than over 20, 30, 40 years.
I think we're missing. We're talking about real estate. I thought we were talking about recruiting in the future of hiring.
Wait, can I
but
bring
it
this
is.
back in, you guys? Because we got like 5 minutes. Kevin, you had a really interesting, I think, bullet point, and then I just wanted to kind of address this because one of our keynote tomorrow is Astad Hanjisha. I said that right. Astad Hanjisha. He is the Senior Vice President of Talent Acquisition for Experian. And he spoke at my LAX TechRecruit conference. And one of the things that he mentioned to me is building this center of excellence in talent acquisition within this huge, massive company, right? And he said that, 10 years ago, after our last economic crash, in the financial industry in 2007, 2008, that a lot of companies, because of all the layoffs, where there was after that, there was this war for talent. And then a lot of companies were reaching out to staffing agencies and RPOs because they didn't have sourcing teams and recruiters because they let them all go. And then these companies became dependent on them and they said, wait, we got to build our own internal talent acquisition teams. And so you saw this after this recession, like this reliance, and then people saying, no, we got to Experian, we got to build this internal center of excellence talent acquisition team so we're not reliant on agencies. But you had said that you see that that's going to change. I'm just curious if you want to talk about that in the few minutes we have.
Who are you asking that question to?
Oh, Kevin.
Yeah, I presented a new model in my talk today of how an internal TA function might be organized. And I said it will probably be a hybrid model with a huge amount of hiring done through RPOs. And what's left internally, there will be a automation center. I sort of called it the data center, which will be not necessarily part of TA. It's sort of a center of excellence. That will be an intermediary that will provide the technology and all the backbone support for the people that remain in TA. Now there'll be a strategy office at the top that will lay out strategy, do data analytics, do a lot of the more macro kinds of things that need to get done in order to inform and empower the bottom layer, which I think will be cross-functional teams of people that are doing whatever TA is left, that will be doing the closing, the negotiating, the influencing of hiring managers, and so forth. These sort of softer skills that at some level, not at every level, I agree with you, Sarah, but at some levels, there'll still be a necessity for that to happen. Yeah. And there'll still be a necessity to deal with. And so this cross-functional team will be much, much smaller. The whole middle layer of recruiting will be gone. And this piece at the bottom will be basically an elite sort of cross-functional team of people who are very skilled at influencing, negotiating, candidate experience, all the things that are human, that are not technically enabled yet well, and so forth. So I see we have 2 minutes before we're going to get closed.
Everybody, the lounge is open for another hour. Just so everybody knows, the lounge is open for another hour if everybody wants to continue conversations in there. But go ahead, Kevin.
Is there any wine in there?
I wish. Maybe we should just close up here because it looks like it's going to just close on us. I want to thank everybody and all of our speakers. Let me X out of that. for being here today. This has been a fantastic discussion, and the first day for Talent Congress. We'll be back here same time tomorrow, day 2 for Talent Congress, and then day 3. So tomorrow's Talent Intelligence and Analytics, and then day 3 is sourcing and recruitment. So thank you all of you for participating, and join us in the lounge to continue this discussion.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.